Hello there, thanks for joining us for this edition of Talking Europe. You find us here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Now, Europeans must take greater responsibility for their security. Those are the words not of Donald Trump, but of the European Union's heads of state and government themselves in the conclusions of their summit in December 2016. Well, just over a year on, Europe does now have its first permanent structured defence cooperation, but it seems more integration could be on the cards. What's more, the European Commission estimates that this could all cost less, not more, overall, predicting savings of between 25 and 100 billion euros per year. Well, as defence experts meet political leaders at the Munich Security Conference this February, we're asking whether Europe is moving towards a so-called European army. Indeed, what is necessary and what is possible. I'm joined by two MEPs. Claire Moody from the UK is Vice Chair of the European Parliament Security and Defence Subcommittee. She's with the Socialist and Democrats group. Thanks for being with us, Claire.
My pleasure, thank you.
A member of that same committee from Sweden and with the Greens group, Bodil Valero MEP. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we also have an expert in defence policy and international politics, to put it quite broadly, Alexis Vallas. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Professor at Sciences Po Strasbourg University, and you've also long been a political advisor to NATO and just started doing the same for the EU as well. Right where our topic is today. Thank you. Well, we're going to start off with a statistic for you. A recent poll carried out for the Munich Security Conference found that 75% of Europeans from 6 of the largest member states favour close military cooperation in Europe in the future of some kind. Now, in a recent debate, there was also strong support from the European Parliament members. Claire Moody, as a Vice Chair of that Security and Defence Committee, I'll come to you first. What's necessary for Europe? What threats are we talking about? And is this a European army that we're heading to?
So there are multiple threats that we are having to face up to, and by doing so as a European Union, doing so effectively by working together, effectively and efficiency. And they range clearly from dealing with the terrorist threats that we face within all of our countries in differing ways, but also looking at cyber attacks and the consequences of cyber attacks as well. And then working together efficiently to ensure that we're meeting the requirements there are for our whole defence sector as well. Again, so that we are not tripping over each other or indeed leaving huge gaps in the work that we are doing in the separate member states as well.
Well, I'd like to come to Bodil Valero for your view on this. I know that the Greens group has raised some questions about what this integration might look like. What do you think is necessary for Europe in terms of defence?
I think that we have to see what Claire just said, that we have different threats now. And apart from those Claire spoke about, I think we also have to deal with the climate change threats. Absolutely. Because the climate change will make a lot of unrest and unstable situations in the world with a lot of migration. And yes, we have another situation now in Europe. It's not as 10 years ago, and as we have another situation, we have to adapt to the new situation. And that sometimes means that we have to cooperate more, and I think that we have to do that, but I don't think that we need to go to a common army for that cooperation.
Well, that spirit of cooperation that you talk about, it's something that runs through the European Union's philosophy, but also something that a lot of people in Europe talk about a lot is that Europe is a peace project. It's a defender of peace. Claire Moody, if I just come back to you, if we're moving towards more military integration, more spending in some ways on military technology, that kind of thing, is Europe still a defender of peace? Can it still say that?
Well, firstly, you said earlier on, what our citizens are expecting of us to do, and that is to protect them with all the threats that we have been talking about. And in a very real sense, actually, that then is about peace and ensuring peace. But in addition to that, one of the things the Parliament has been quite clear about as well is that the funding we're looking at in terms of the defence spending has to be additional funding, so that this isn't diverting from existing programmes that we have and intend to pursue in the next multi-annual financial framework. For example, what is now Horizon 2020, but the research programme in the next MFF. That has to continue with the defined budget it has, but we need to ensure that there is additional financing that we can then put into these areas of our work, because it is important we do both ends of these things, but it isn't seen that defence is being done at the expense of our existing priorities.
If I come to you, Alexis Vallas, you were nodding there to what Claire Moody said, but while we're talking about additional spending, we're also hearing the Commission talking about us getting savings. Can we square that circle?
No, I fully agree with what was said. I think we cannot expect, to to get rid of all the duplication we have now between member states. But at least with this new PESCO, we can start to really harmonize the industrial defense sectors of all those member states, and we should we should save some money and be more efficient, have more interoperability between the member states.
Okay, well, let's talk about the feasibility and the practicalities of all that in just a moment. I'd like to run a report now from our correspondent in Germany, Anne Meyer. She's been looking at the situation with the German military. For a long time, Germany's been criticised for not spending the 2% of GDP on its defence as required as a NATO member. The German military now recruiting, now investing more. Check out this report.
Your Bundeswehr needs you, and it's just like any other employer. The German army is desperately looking for recruits around the country. Not just soldiers, there are vacancies in IT, medicine and mechanics.
We are looking to recruit 20,000 soldiers each year, so we offer all kinds of vocational training.
7 years after the end of conscription, the Bundeswehr wants more troops to meet new geopolitical challenges. The aim is 198,000 soldiers by 2024. These young women are showing interest.
The Bundeswehr is a very serious employer. Everyone who works there says it's good.
Given the threat of terrorism, it is more important than ever to protect the people.
The recruitment campaign costs 35 million euros a year. A video series, The Recruits, made for social networks, shows the daily life of German soldiers in Mali. Germany is engaged in 15 foreign operations and wants to strengthen its contribution to the European security and defence policy. This expert says that demands on the army are growing.
Clearly, Germany will play a key role in the coming years in European defence, if only because Germany has the greatest financial capacity.
The next grand coalition plans to invest an extra billion euros a year in defence and to increase soldiers' pay to make joining the army a more attractive prospect.
Okay, Alexis Vallas, I'd like to come back to you on that feasibility aspect. It's all well and good to talk about integration, but, we're talking about all these different militaries that run in such a different way. How can this be harmonised?
Yeah. Just if I may, because I'm here also as you introduced me as the NATO guy, the bad guy. Actually, NATO does not require any member states to spend 2%. It's just a goal for 2024. And you have, sorry, I don't know exactly the wording in English, s'efforcer d'atteindre.
A commitment.
Yes, so it's a political commitment. And most of the member states did not reach that level yet. So Germany is already doing a lot. And I think that for Germany, the turning point was really in the 90s when they really start to send, to deploy troops in peacekeeping operations.
Okay, well, looking to the future then, do you see a clash at all between this idea of more integration, but armies, clearly Germany making its own decisions here, not necessarily looking at the broader European picture?
No, as it was said before, if you want to dedicate the European integration to peace, you have to be able to protect this peace. So we have more threats, and a lot of them we have a consensus. Terrorism was mentioned, cyber defense, migration. We could add the relationship with Russia, energy security. The problem is the prioritization between those threats. And if you want to be ready to deal with all of them, you need to invest a bit more than what we've been doing up to now.
And it's where we invest as well. I think there are some clashes, some splits and divisions. Bodil Valero, if I come back to you, I know that the Greens have raised a question, for example, about investing in military equipment and weapons. For example, wondering if Europe might finance to 100% armed drones, for example. Where would you see limits for the EU in that sense?
I would start with a 2% goal, because I think it's not the goal as such that's important. The money we put into something, it's what do we get for that money, the value for money. That's the important thing. So to put just 2% goal, that means that in reality, we are just paying to the arms industry to produce more and more and more. And that's not the idea. The defense spending is a national question for the moment, and it should stay as a national question. That's also why we are very much against this European industrial defense program, giving money to it, because as we said, we can save a lot of money if the countries, they do cooperate more on the production of arms and so on, and why don't use that money that we save for this this integration or coordination of defense.
It is controversial. Claire Moody, what's your position on that area?
So there is, if you look, for example, at the comparison between the output and the outcomes of the US spending on defence versus the kind of aggregate EU spending on defence, then there is a far more effective way we can use our public budgets in terms of this cooperation. And there's a lot of work being done around the outcomes of this spending, for example, in the research area, not just in the hardware, if you like, the defence sector, that delivers incredible benefits across society. You know, we all take the internet for granted now. You know, the origins of that are, way back come from defence programmes.
The EU as an organisation, fairly or unfairly, does get criticised for being quite slow on decision making. Getting all these different member states to agree on things does take a while. Is this really going to be practical?
Well, if you look at, for example, I mean, we're talking about EDIDP, or actually EDIDP has been agreed remarkably quickly.
The Industrial Defence Programme.
The Industrial Development Programme. So in that context, we've moved quite swiftly. But also, rarely are these things that you need to be delivered tomorrow, in the sense they're longer term, they're looking at the valley of death in industrial manufacturing processes. So it's not a short-term outcome.
So you see it as something where there could be quite effective. Alexis Vallas, with your experience, do you see this as something where the EU can move quickly enough, if perhaps not from one day to the next, but...
Well, again, it's going to be difficult. You know that all this part of the European integration is not the normal one with an important role for the Commission or the Parliament. It's based on consensus, so you need almost all the member states to agree.
And we do have these sort of philosophical clashes, not just between the different political parties, but within countries. Some want to perhaps keep their neutral status.
Yes, but it's the least common denominator. You have to be based on that. But I would say that the neutral states are not really a problem. We've seen all the neutral states of the European Union. They have been very active in all kinds of military operations. Sweden, Ireland, Finland, they participate very actively in all kinds of EU or NATO military operations. So I think that's not the problem.
However, if there is a change of focus of what the militaries are doing, and it is more in a European cause rather than the national states deciding for themselves, but Isabelle, you are from Sweden. Do you see that there could be a clash for this traditionally neutral country?
For the Swedes, for example, even the case of NATO is the support for NATO is diminishing. And that's rather strange, because there's been a lot of political pressure to put it on the arena, but it's diminishing amongst the population. There is no support for a common army, but the Swedes, they do want to cooperate.
That's sort of really just at a starting point here, aren't we? Unfortunately, we have run out of time for our discussion. I'm sure this is a topic we'll come back to. Thank you all very much for taking part. Just before we go, we do, of course, like to keep a close eye on the facts and the fakes, the fake news going on around Europe. This week, we've got a fact check on a story that would have you believe that the EU had given up on trying to manage mass migration. Take a listen.
No corner of the European Union will escape mass immigration. This is the shocking quote that was attributed to the Commissioner for Migration and Home Affairs, Dimitris Avramopoulos, last December. The quote was picked up by several websites close to far-right circles in Europe, including F de Souche in France and Les Observateurs in Switzerland, who both claimed they lifted the quote from an opinion article authored by Avramopoulos for the news site Politico. Well, as it turns out, the Commissioner actually never wrote this. Avramopoulos has indeed contributed an op-ed for Politico in which he states, quote, "We cannot and will never be able to stop migration," unquote. But the Greek Commissioner was actually referring to migration at the global level, not at the European level. And at no moment does he actually use the expression mass immigration, remarks the French news agency AFP. Now, one of the two websites, fdesouche.com, seems to have admitted its mistake and has since corrected the headline of its article. But this is not the case of the Swiss website Les Observateurs, which maintain in its headline the fictional quote attributed to the Greek Commissioner.
There we go, Frédéric Simon getting to grips with some more fake news for you there. That is the end of our programme. I'd like to thank my guests once again. Bodil Valero from Sweden, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Also Claire Moody of the Socialists and Democrats group, and our outside expert Alexis Vallas from Sciences Po Strasbourg. Thank you all very much for your time. That is it from us for now. Do stay tuned. More European news coming up for you very shortly.